Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. We are currently in our relationship series, and as a part of that, I would like to shout out the better half of my relationship as it is her 28th birthday today.
Oh,
Act surprise.
or not. Right.
Shocking. But it's been really cool. We've known each other for the last, what, 2.5 years, and just seeing, like, your growth throughout this time has been amazing because you challenge me to grow every single day, and I think that has been something that has really inspired this series for me, seeing how far we've come in our relationship and how much we've grown, especially having been in relationships, both of us in the past, that probably weren't as cohesive.
Mhm.
Just seeing the work that we've both really committed to throughout this, I think just being able to share that with other people is such a gift. Like, that's really what we're supposed to do, is make our mess our message, and I'm just super thankful to have a partner like you who's so committed to addressing the problem and, like, us growing together, and it's never a question of if we're going to stay, it's a question of how we work through this, and I'm just super grateful for your commitment to that always.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you meant like my personal growth or my communication style growth.
I mean,
So,
honestly, on every level, like, I think
yeah,
in all of our
yeah.
relationships, like this series, we're talking mostly about like romantic relationships, but in every relationship, I think we should be really proactive about reflecting back to each other our growth, because it's really hard to notice it in yourself. So here's your cue, maybe reach out to a friend today or talk to your partner and just, you know, recognize them for a way that you've seen them grow or something that you've noticed in their own journey, as that can be really a helpful motivator and just remind people that they are making progress even when they do still feel stuck in some areas.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts of your post for me that stuck out to me was you talking about my growth as a person. And in my reflection of our relationship, in my reflection of our communication style and the reasons why I'm so grateful, a big part of it is how we communicate as a whole, not even during conflict, but in general. Our communication is always very open and it's very vulnerable, and it allows for expansion, because we're both actively listening as well. And something that you've taught me is how to observe my feelings as well as totally hear your feelings and understanding that both are valid and going about, again, we are together in solving the problem or we are together in growing, even the positive moments. So my gratitude for you is infinite, you know that. But one of the biggest areas that you've helped me grow in is communication. And if anybody, who had known me before COVID would say that I was a very angry or aggressive or short fused or um, opinionated and stubborn. And I'm not saying that my stubbornness is any less than it was before, but my ability to listen fully and be calm and have more of a response than a reaction has been the one of the biggest changes that you've allowed me to have because of the way you're reflecting back to me. You're never loud with me. You don't ever have an aggressive tone. You're always super calm. You're always really willing to hear my side and also express your own. And in that is that ability to trust and that ability to feel safe. And those two things together, I think, are what make communicating and growing in communication optimal. Or I'm not sure if optimal is the right word, but that's where you can find this beautiful newness that comes with expressing yourself and expressing what you think with someone you love. It helps grow the love immensely and it helps the other person learn how to love you better as well and love yourself for that matter.
Yes, 100%. And I think that communication is a big theme in this week's Q&A that we ran. So I think that's something we could really talk about. Um, there's kind of two major themes when I ask the question on Instagram as to what do you struggle with most in your relationship. One theme is finding a good relationship, like finding someone with the same grind that I have, or having a relationship at all. People in my generation are just really challenging. So that question of like, how do you find someone? And then a one branch off of that saying, I'm introverted and it's hard to interact with a lot of people. So when you're in that like dating, scouting process for an
Mm,
ideal partner, how does that work when you're someone who's introverted? So those are a little bit different, but I think that would be a good one to tackle first, is that's kind of like, first steps really before we even talk about what communication looks like.
right. Do you want to go ahead and start answering that, considering you're a little bit more introverted than yours truly over here? I
Yeah,
feel
I think
like,
I can answer that portion
okay.
for sure. Like
Okay.
when it comes to finding someone in general, I think you have to remember that the only thing you're responsible for is like the energy that you're putting out into the world. And the energy that you're going to put out is going to attract certain people. Then it's up to you to make sure that those people align with your values and don't cross your boundaries. Or if they do and you have a conversation about it and present your boundaries and then they respect them, there's that growth, continuous growth in it. So I think that's super important. As an introvert, it's challenging. I got married pretty young, so I'm not in a situation where I've like dated or been in the dating scene a lot. But I think connecting with people who share something similar, like a passion or an interest, can be super helpful. Uh, for instance, like you and I met at the gym, and that was something that we shared. Now, obviously, you could go to the gym and meet every kind of person possible, but having some common foundation as an introvert, especially, makes it so much easier. You have something to relate on and a foundation of conversation, and then you build from there. Now, I think some environments are even more conducive to finding people who share your values, which I think is one of the most important things when looking for a partner. So, for instance, like if I were on the dating scene now, I think I would look more in church for someone knowing, like, okay, at least that is our foundation. We may have different interests and personalities, but for me, that foundation of God is there. And even though you and I met at the gym, I would say our relationship was so founded on our spirituality. So, finding that common ground that is like the closest to the root of who you are as possible think makes it a lot easier to start relating to someone. Also, if you're introverted, it's likely that you're going to be drawn to people who are a little bit more extroverted just to kind of balance each other. So that hopefully can take some pressure off. And if you meet someone else who's introverted and the conversation is just like stuttering, that might not be someone who's really like a good fit for you because you're not like balancing each other super well. So if you're finding that every conversation is a grind, you can acknowledge that that's a great person and you might have some similarities, but they may not complement you in the way that's going to allow for like the most enjoyable interactions long term.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you took my thought and just put words to it, because when I was thinking about answering this and the very particular part about not being on the same level of a grind or not sharing the same values, that to me is so it's very specific. And when you're considering your values, for one, know thyself, right? So make sure you have a really good understanding of yourself first and what it is that you need and are looking for. Also, not having the expectation that someone who you're going to meet is going to fulfill all of your needs or fulfill everything that you want. It's having that. I guess for me, this is where I'm saying this, and why I'm saying this is because for a really long time, I was looking for somebody to almost fix like the pain or the struggle that I was having in my day-to-day personal life, as if doing life with another person or having someone else was going to all of a sudden make everything good and right. And that misconception was really a lack of self-love personally. So we should be able to do our life and our journeys in our lane and also have our partner doing their life in their lane, and we can merge our lanes on some things, some, the way that we're interacting after work or whatever. Like, you're gonna have a life together as well, but your values need to be established in yourself first, and understanding that finding another person is not should not be your solution for fixing or, mending or healing, essentially, is why I'm saying that I've been through that for sure. So back to what I was saying before, in the environment, if for some reason you think you need to go to a bar to find someone, but you don't really like to go out and drink, that's not going to be someone who's going to fit your values. Going to a church because you're really spiritual and you love God and you place God at the center, that's probably a great place to potentially mingle with somebody, meet somebody, interact with somebody. Again, the gym, if you're really passionate about the gym and you want to share that with your partner, even if it's going to like to Starbucks to do work and you randomly see someone else who's been working there, whatever. It's like put yourself in environments where you want to be that align with your values, and then start to kind of understand, all right, this might be a group of individuals that has somebody that might mesh well with me in a romantic setting. The other thing I want to add on, because I thought you just did a great job of explaining all of that, is a friendship first can and I honestly, before this, I hadn't experienced being friends first and then dating, but it massively changed the foundation that we built our relationship off of. And so if you're not looking, like actively searching as if it's this thing that you need, but being able to just engage with another person and see things start to align, build a friendship, build a foundation, build that trust, build that willingness to be open and be vulnerable, start to really learn someone, all of a sudden you can kind of have a moment where you realize, like, oh, maybe I have feelings for this person, and you guys can develop that moving forward. Because for us, I mean, we were friends for months without even knowing that we had feelings for each other in this way, so having that beginning period of time where we were very focused on building the foundation of friendship led to us being able to have this mutual respect going into a relationship where we could talk about a lot of things already, or already knew things about each other. When we entered into the romantic part, it wasn't this like, oh, I'm having to learn all of this, but I'm already in this romantic setting with you, and like, oh geez, like I'm not sure if I can do it, like that kind of stuff, that back and forth of frustration. So that was just the additional thing I wanted to add on to that.
That's so great. I have a couple more that I kind of thought of while you were talking.
Yeah.
You mentioned like church. We talked a little bit about going to church. That can seem intimidating. And I think the gym as well. Like, no one really wants, a lot of people do not want you to come up and like flirt with them in the gym. So I'm definitely not using that as like, hey, here's your free pass to go like flirt. But those can be a good environments. But another thing I found is there's meetup groups, and there's meetup groups for singles. So it'll be like 10 people. There's like single groups in the area, and they might like go to a live music event on a week or go hiking one week. And those are great opportunities as an introvert because you're going to this group, there's not a lot of pressure around it, and you're doing something. Like doing things together can be really helpful. So you're not just having to talk the whole time. Create
Oh,
experiences together where you can talk about what you're doing. And then in the process, you're learning about that person and how they function and maybe how they handle challenges, do like an escape room or something like that. So kind of put yourself in different environments. But being in a group setting like that can be helpful. So there's not this pressure of like, oh my gosh, now I'm like stuck talking to this person.
I love that, because I feel like a lot of people think they need to revert to apps and stuff.
Mm.
And I just don't think you really have to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all, but sometimes it's a little unsure about, who is this a real person or not, kind of a thing. So I think that's a great point. I love that. I love that.
Now, the second line of answers was more around communication. So one person said communication, one person said my reactivity, and one person said patience. So
What was the question?
things you struggle with in the relationship being communication, reactivity, and patience, which I think are all along the same vein.
Mhm.
And it comes down to probably once you're past those initial stages of dating and having experiences and you're sharing day-to-day life, how are you communicating around the challenges that come up? And then you're with this person more frequently, maybe when you're not in the best mood and you're tired or you're PMSing or you're hungry and now you're feeling super reactive, or you have these like patterns of communication that start to come up where as soon as person A has this kind of tone, person B already is in like short fuse, I will fight you mode. And it
Mhm.
just starts this like pattern, and every time that chain of events occurs, as soon as one of those triggers is cued.
Awesome. I love that. I definitely agree to your point that reactivity and patience are conjoined in some way. They're definitely two things that I know I've struggled with personally. And I still struggle with that a little bit, you know? I think it's important to say, you know, it's not if it's a part of your personality, if you're a little bit more, I say Aries or a little bit more, you know, dominant in nature or grew up in a situation where you're using your voice meant yelling or having a more aggressive tone, learning the learning process of that, give yourself a lot of grace and compassion, but also ensure that you're apologizing. You're the second you realize you're loud, stop being loud right in that moment. If you're aware of it and it's coming out, you still have a every single moment you have an opportunity to make a new decision. So even if you're in the middle of it, you can still say, I'm sorry, I know I'm loud, this is just really important to me. This is the value that I feel like is being uprooted or being broken in this situation, things like that. And for me, how I really learned to do that was by letting the other person say all of the things that they want to say and really prioritizing listening. And I know that that's challenging, especially when those emotions start to bubble up like a lava lamp. Like you're just like, holy crap, I feel like my anger is just like sitting right here. But the thing about that is, it's momentary. If you can kind of sit with that for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, usually you're understanding, you can sit there in that time and really try to figure out what's going on. Then all of a sudden you have an actual point or actual value or actual um, piece of information that you've just gathered by sitting with the impatience and the anger that you can then talk to your partner about. So listening, if you can prioritize listening, remember to listen. So say we're in some sort of conversation and what you say is starting to trigger me. My what I do is I literally am like, I need to listen fully to what she's saying because I need to also understand every single person's experience is valid, period. You know? So regardless of if I have the same experience or agree or not, your experience and other person's experience is valid. There's nothing because they're telling you how they're feeling. So when you're starting to get frustrated and angry, that is because you're feeling like you either need to defend yourself because you're feeling like it's an attack or you're letting them down or you're feeling whatever it is that you're feeling. Sitting with that long enough to stay listening to your partner, not thinking about what you're going to say back to them, and then saying, if you need a pause, I need a pause right now. I'm feeling loud or I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling really triggered. Come back once you've sat with yourself enough to figure out a point at which you can start to then have a discussion with your partner.
I think that listening piece is huge. In that moment, I think acknowledge what you want. Like I want to be heard. That's what comes up in me. Like I want to be heard, and that sounds louder than what you're saying sometimes. But what I tell myself is like, give what you want. So I'm like, if I want to be heard, I got to hear first. And
Mhm.
then I also know that if I hear you, yes, I do know, although not in the moment, am I super conscious of it, that once I hear everything that you're saying, I'm going to have a little bit of a different perspective, like a fuller picture of what's going on. But it's also going to usually contribute more to your willingness to then hear me because you're feeling heard out of that. Whereas if I'm just like already planning my response while you're talking, or starting to talk over you, or interjecting my feelings while you're talking about yours, or telling you why your feelings aren't valid in my eyes, I'm not creating room for either of us to hear each other. And I've learned like if I'm just quiet, I won't forget how I'm feeling. So I'll still have a space to be able to share that with you. But if I'm quiet and hear you, I can usually answer you with a lot more wisdom and allow my initial emotion to dissolve a little bit so I can speak with clarity and also contribute to your feeling heard in it as well. And yeah, everyone's feelings are valid, and that may seem frustrated when maybe, for instance, the example I used last week, my friend who struggling with her partner who's like super anxious and his anxiety is like weighing on her. And she's like, look, I'm handling my stuff. Like, you need to deal with your anxiety because it's making me more anxious. In her eyes, I imagine if I were her, I'd probably feel like you have to like get your anxiety under control because you're stressing me out all the time. She's not wrong, right? He's probably is contributing to her stress. But his perspective is like I'm stressed and I'm an external processor and I'm talking to the one person I know I can actually talk to about all this stuff with. And both people are so right, but it's definitely not working for at least one of the people. So there's got to be another answer. If something's not working for one of you, there's probably another approach altogether. It's not like person A is right, person B is right or wrong. It's this let's find solution C that makes us both feel heard and is that middle ground compromise where neither of our boundaries are crossed and all of our values are acknowledged and respected.
Yes. I think the one thing I want to add is have the self-awareness to understand if you've communicated about the thing you're about to freak out about to your partner in the past. Like, have you check first of all, check yourself from a did I sleep well last night? Am I hungry? What happened in my day? Like, take into account everything that you've been through in the day. Because if you're not well rested, if you have not fueled yourself, if you haven't taken time to slow down, something happened at work and you're already like in a mood, like that, those things are going to affect how you show up for your partner, especially if something comes up in some sort of argument or discussion. So either communicate that at first to over communicate or make sure that you're self-aware enough to know like I don't have my normal amount of capacity, emotional capacity to be in a particular situation that could escalate, and I need to make sure I check myself before I enter into that situation, for one. The other thing is usually if you're lashing out, it's about something that's been pissing you off for like months or weeks, right? So it's like if there is something that bothers you, the second it's really like beginning to bother you early on, communicate about that right then and there. Otherwise, you're going to build this resentment, and that's going to come up in an argument where all of a sudden it's not about this dog that we have or whatever. All of a sudden, you're bringing up so and so doesn't do the dishes and that has nothing to do with the dog, you know? So really trying to over communicate early on just because it bothers you one time and it doesn't bother you that much doesn't mean that you shouldn't communicate about that. Because if that starts to build up, it's going to lead to a much shorter fuse, a lot of resentment, and a lack of communication. Where if you hadn't shared that information with your partner before, how are they supposed to know that you feel that way or that they need something from you? Then all of a sudden it's like they're blindsided when you're all of a sudden bringing up something in the middle of an argument, or like literally so angry and impatient about something that seems so small to your partner. So really being able to understand that even though it'll be challenging initially to have a conversation with somebody about something, if you do it early on where your fuse is not so short, if you're not so angry about it, if it hasn't been bothering you for weeks, now all of a sudden we can have a conversation about it that's much less elevated, a lot more calm, and the other person has an opportunity to then show up. Because how can, say you are mad that I haven't taken the trash out in 3 weeks, but you've never told me that you need me, that should be a responsibility of yours, me, right? Like you're telling me I would like you to do that because I do the floors, the kitchen, the dishes. This is not a real example, but Liv is the cleaner. She is amazing at cleaning. My responsibility is the floors on the weekend, and I'm still learning. So, anyway, my point is tell that person, and then you can hold them responsible. Because if you tell me, I need you to take the trash out when it gets full, can that be your responsibility? We communicate about it. You've been a little upset for a couple of weeks because it's always been you. Now the next time it doesn't happen, now you can, there's more righteous anger there. You can say, hey, like I asked this of you, you said you would do it, and it hasn't been happening. Like, let's have another conversation about that.
One person said that they struggle with assumptions. And I think that assumptions are huge when it comes to reactivity. Reactivity for me is me having the assumption that you don't hear me, that you don't care how I feel, that you're being selfish. It's like I have some underlying belief that is not in favor of you being for this relationship. And I think that replacing those with more positive assumptions of like, okay, we're both in this together, and then reinforcing that positive assumption with those like weekly check-ins where you're like, all right, are we doing well in our relationship? And just reiterating that we're both really actively working on making this a great relationship. And that's our priority, both of us separately. It's our priorities to be great in this relationship. That can be helpful because when you go into those situations, that reactivity sometimes can come out of assumptions that are rooted in more past communication patterns, maybe not even in this relationship. So if you've been with someone in the past who, as soon as you start to say your feelings, they start gaslighting you. And now you're in this relationship with someone who doesn't do that, but you already have like practiced those patterns. As soon as you maybe you start to say how you feel, and if they become reactive, or then even if they listen to you and then say how they feel, you might go into like, I'm being gaslighted, and start reacting out of that more like that past pattern as opposed to what's actually in front of you. So, kind of reminding yourself and talking to each other frequently about, hey, what's our goal this week as a couple? Hey, where are we in this relationship? Like, is there anything either of us can work on? And keeping that open line of communication from day to day can really help when it comes to those like make or break moments that are more higher conflict when you're naturally going to switch into old patterns. You need that practice time. Like, think of every day of the week as time to practice. And then there's going to be those game days where you're like, crap, you didn't take the trash out, and I'm about to flip my lid and go off about the other 10 things that I have on my list that have been slowly eating away at me. Or I could have been a little bit more proactive through the week and kind of talk to you about some things. Now, I think that there's a dark side to that where you can start being really nitpicky at the other person and like nagging. So I think you have to find that balance with your partner. I feel like both of us are really neutral about stuff. So we can just say like, pause, can you do this? Awesome, move forward. But if you're having a bad day, or if your partner is really stressed, you might need to find a better balance where maybe a couple times a week, or at the end of the day at this time, we sit down and kind of talk about what we need from each other, so it doesn't feel like I need you to do this and I need you to do that, and you start to just get kind of naggy towards the other person, or pointing out everything that you feel like they're doing wrong.
Yeah, I love that point. What came up for me was kind of this full circle of thought of how we built our relationship off of the foundation of friendship. And the thought about assumptions that came up is what I experienced and what I would advise because of what I learned from it is my assuming was not negative. My assuming was what I thought you would want me to be doing to stay with me, right? So the assumption side left me not being my most authentic self all the time. Not that I was trying, not that I wasn't being my true self, but I wasn't necessarily giving myself what I needed out of fear of you might seeing that assumption that you might think hanging out at night to watch TV to unwind equals laziness or whatever, and it should be replaced with a personal development video, that kind of thing. So in the very beginning, I think that is the most optimal time to be seriously super authentic, very upfront about what's important to you, what you like to do to regulate, because like we said in the beginning, know thyself first. It's really important that you know the things that you need. And again, you're going to learn, obviously, things will be uncovered as you go through the relationship. You don't need to know like everything about yourself, but enough to stay very grounded in who you are entering into the relationship, being able to then have those conversations where if your partner asks what it is that you need from a chores perspective or how you like to split it up, you already know, hey, I prefer to do the dishes, could you take the laundry or something, you know? And I know that's pretty simple and surface level, and things get much more complicated in relationships, but if you have a much deeper understanding of self where you can show up authentically, then it doesn't feel like you have to change yourself to meet this person's needs throughout the relationship out of fear of losing that person. You can say, okay, I just don't think this person's right for me. And that's cool. You know, it's like, all right, it just didn't work. And that's okay. You know, that's why I think early on in the early stages is the most important piece to really start to build the foundation of friendship and talking about the things that are necessary. See if compromise is possible, staying true to your true self without making the assumption that you need to make these changes to ensure that the relationship continues.
I think that's super great, and that foundation is so important. Um, I think one thing to kind of reiterate from last week is using I language, and I think over communicating to a degree. Like, for me, it's helpful for me if I say I'm feeling really angry because that's an emotion that makes me really uncomfortable. And it's like if I don't say it, I feel like I have to express it, but I don't really naturally know how to express anger without just like, I don't even know. I haven't had like many instances where I've like actually externally expressed anger. It tends to be more like embedded. So saying like, I feel really angry, and when you said this, I started to think this, and then I felt this. And it's kind of walking them through that stepwise process. It helps you kind of break down the series of events, but it also can take some pressure off of saying, like you really pissed me off when you did this. It's like that accusation. So moving from an accusation to more of like, can I tell you what I'm feeling and how that feeling came up? So that you're
Mm.
both kind of working through it together. And again, it's not making your partner the problem, it's sharing where you're at, it's being open about your emotions, but not necessarily identifying with or acting out of those emotions. So when you feel like you're a reactive person, instead of reacting by going at the person, maybe your initial reaction can go like, I feel really angry right now and I just need a minute to breathe. So you get that out and then you just take a second, but verbalize it, because some of us, I feel like if we don't say something, we feel like we're just going to explode or we can't even focus on what the other person's saying. So take that time that you need, but be sure you're communicating throughout that process. You don't just shut down and leave without saying anything. You don't just blow up at them, but you put that, insert that pause by describing your emotion and making it about the emotion and not about anything that your partner did until you can rationally kind of walk through what happened. And also, like, don't, if you're going to assume something, just don't assume that your partner knows exactly how you feel. Like, they don't. Even if they know you super well, your body language is not as clear as you think. We all come from different backgrounds. We all assume different things about the way people are acting. And if you're irritated that your partner left their lunchbox on the kitchen counter for the 40th time and you're going to have to go put it up, and you decide to just go in there and huff and puff and like snatch it off the counter and throw it in the closet and slam the door, they might literally think, well, oh, you had a bad day, and not even know like what you're upset about. So like be really clear and remember that the goal is to work through the conflict, not to punish the other person for how you feel like maybe they're affecting your emotions.
Just asterisk that. Everybody just rewind, take that button, go back and push play again, because that is probably, if not one of the most important things I think to remember. That's such a great point.
So the other question that we had was, what would you like to experience more of in your relationship? Um, Now, responses for this, we had a couple different ones. So one was growth, religious, and health. One
Mm.
was fun. One was sex. And one was couples training together. So I think growth and fun are kind of interesting because they're both super open ended. And what that looks like for each couple is going to be really different. But to me, growth is you're both committed to, I think about 1% better. How do I make myself 1% better today? So that's not trying to do all the things. Like I need to meditate and I need to have a gratefulness practice and I need to run and I need to like not do all the things, but it's like, how do I make myself 1% better today? Or within the context of your relationship, what's one more way I could show up for my partner today? How could I go out of my way to be a little bit better in this relationship? Or maybe what are some good questions I could ask? How could I have a conversation where I'm really listening to and hearing them? And I think a lot of that growth comes out of intentional time together, which is why I think at the beginning of our relationships, often we grow really fast, and
Mhm.
then as we become more familiar, that growth starts to slow down. And some of that will be natural as you go from not knowing each other to obviously knowing each other and sharing a life together to just kind of like doing life together. But I think you can continue to foster that growth by seeing that person as separate, doing things together, like still putting yourselves in experiences where you're getting to learn about each other and also having very intentional conversations, maybe even with some structured questions so you can continue getting to know each other.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is just focus on your own personal growth. Like if your personal growth is going to lead to relational growth, for sure. You'll be reflecting each other and talking about what you're learning in your personal journey. That is an amazing conversation point, amazing opportunity to know your partner deeper and absolutely create growth in that area. The fun piece, I think, and maybe you can touch on this too, but just have a night where you just brainstorm a bunch of things that you find fun and write them all down. And then just start to look up, like, is there anything in our area this weekend? Could we plan a quick trip? Is there something close by? Just or have fun at home, play cards, turn some music on, change up the routine a bit. If you just come home, eat dinner, and watch TV, like maybe try a board game, try a card game, get those questions, that game that, has one question on one side and you ask your partner and then your partner responds back. Like have a learning game like that. That's also going to contribute to the growth, overall growth.
That's a great idea. And I actually had another one I learned this morning. So my ex-husband Travis, for those of you who don't know, Travis is alive. Someone commented on my YouTube. I'm sorry for your loss, and I just wanted to clarify he's alive and well, and we're still friends. But he showed me this. You really never know what people are gonna say. He showed me this book, and it's a date ideas, and they're scratch offs, and each one tells you like how much the date's going to cost, and maybe like a theme, like it'll say outdoors or um, adventure or something like that, and then you scratch it off, and you have to go do whatever's on the sheet. So if you're
Wow.
struggling to come up with ideas, doing something like that where it takes that decision fatigue out, I think can be really fun. And for the person who asked this, she has a fairly new baby. So I think having fun in that environment can be challenging. So kind of utilizing your resources, like especially with a kid or multiple kids, you're going to have to be super intentional about setting that time um, for you guys, just you two, because that like family dynamic's awesome, and you want those experiences together. You want to go to the zoo and have fun as a family, but to continue to foster that fun as a couple, you got to see each other as a couple and maybe step out of the parent role sometimes. So can you reach out to your parents or his parents, or um, use a babysitter or something like that, where you can make that intentional time every week or two to go and do something just as a couple.
Yeah, and I think that segues perfectly into training as couples and also the sex comment, because both of those might be communication needs where someone needs to share what each one of those things would mean to them and set intentional time. Like I know Jordan Peterson had a podcast where he talked about having a particular night be the night that you are committed to having sex with your partner, you know? And that's one way I think personally in that journey with sex, it's about understanding what sex means to you and really getting deeper on, is that the only way that you're experiencing intimacy with your partner? Because my whole journey, yeah, I mean, I have been in relationships where sex has been constant, or that wasn't really necessarily the struggle, but I was viewing that as the only way to truly connect on that deep, intimate level. And there is nothing like sharing your body in that way with another person, having that deep, emotional, passionate experience. Like, it's such a point of connection in relationships. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, it should be replaced by something else, but really starting to learn what sex means to you, and if it's something that you're almost using as like a problem solver. I know that comes up a lot. Like, sex is this thing that happens where, okay, now we don't have any problems anymore. We're all good, back on the same page, kind of a thing. So just really being open with your partner about whether it's like the way that sex is happening, you want it to be different, or being super open and transparent and willing to receive feedback about what your partner is wanting in this area is super important. Sex is very important for intimacy in a relationship. And if you're on separate pages about frequency, or, what the way in which sex is happening, then be open about that. Have the courage to tell your partner, hey, I'm needing something different in this area. Or intimacy to me is also us just sitting on the couch, cuddling and talking. Like, that fills the same bucket as sex does for me, kind of a thing. So, really, just if you're wanting more sex in the relationship, which is what it sounded like, be open with your partner about that. Ask them why it might not be, like, hear them. Really try to understand why sex isn't as significant to them as it is to you, and really start to compromise, figure out how you both can understand each other in that area and really enhance the overall intimacy experience for you and your partner. The
Yeah,
couples working out thing for me is very similar. Like, if somebody really wants respect for their own gym time, maybe you plan 2 or 3 days a week you guys train together or something, finding a happy medium. But again, communicating, what does going to the gym together mean to you? This is really important to me because this. Well, someone else could then come back to you, I would prefer to be on my split. Like, I don't want to sacrifice my split. Okay, cool. I won't sacrifice my split. We can go 2 to 3 days a week and you can lead it, or whatever. It's just about talking. What is it that it means to you? Is it significant to you? And at what point can you two meet on the scale of where one person's at and where the other is, where you can find that happy compromise and really work together to create a very fruitful environment?
definitely. And I think that that goes with the assumptions. Every time you talk to your partner, I think there's some beauty in treating them like you just met them. and giving them that opportunity to grow constantly and saying, all right, this person, okay, I heard this parable once that a man never crosses the same river twice, and it's because it's neither the same man nor the same river. And I think it's the same thing in a relationship. Every interaction is brand new. Since you last spoke to that person, they've had experiences and they've grown. And cells have died in their bodies and cells have been regenerated, right? And it's the same thing for us. So, like, we go a day, several hours without seeing each other, we both had a lot of experiences in that time. And if I just treat you like I already know you every single time, I'm going to start applying assumptions. Whereas if I come to you with like kind of this innocence and like naivety about, what you think or how you feel instead of making assumptions, I give you that openness to express yourself. But I also am letting go of some of the things and assumptions that I may be making that may be impacting the way that I'm communicating with you. So, for instance, the sex comment, the full comment, to give you some context, was my partner's going through changes. So I imagine like menopause, and even with medication, we don't connect. And that's super challenging because that's a physical
Mm.
barrier. It's like if your partner's not, does not have a sex drive, that can be a big challenge because you don't want to like force it on them, but it's something that you need to feel loved. But there's still a lot of things in our relationship where we may not really be as inclined to a certain behavior, but it's important for our partner. And I think that's where, like you're saying, those conversations around, hey, I'd like to have more sex should not end there. It should start with, hey, sex is really important for me as a form of intimacy. And it's one way that I feel really loved. Uh, is there, can we talk about what expectations each of us have in terms of like frequency of that, or what sex even means? Does that mean like full intercourse? Does that mean we like make out a little bit? Like actually get into the details of that, so that you have clear understanding, but then also opening up the room for your partner to kind of talk about, now how are ways that you feel loved and what are maybe some tangible ways that I could show you that. And that can be super helpful so that you both really know what the other person needs, but you both also still feel really heard about what you need. And then you meet each other in the middle and then you reevaluate, how did this week go? Did you feel like we had enough sex? Did you feel like we had enough, maybe non-intimate physical touch, or whatever that looks like, having those ongoing conversations, but being very honest and open to your partner in those conversations, not getting defensive about, maybe I just don't have a sex drive right now and that's really frustrating for me and I don't really want to talk about it. I'm tired of talking about sex at all. Having that attitude is also going to block your partner off from hearing what you need as well. So I think always coming into it with that openness and trusting that your partner always wants the best and to be close to you.
That's great. I think that's a perfect way to kind of sum up everything we've been talking about.
I think over communication is never a bad thing, especially if you're going through struggles and maybe you guys are just now kind of repatterning the way that your communication is. Talk about everything and be really, allow your emotions to come out, but be neutral about it enough to say, like, hey, I'm feeling this. Can we talk about it? And not making them the problem. And that I think is kind of the theme of everything we've been talking about in these last few weeks. If you really want the best for your relationship, if that's your ultimate intention, then everything that you do within your relationship should be centered around what it looks like to create the best relationship. Sometimes that doesn't mean getting to be right every time, or that your voice is the first one to come out, or that your partner is going to respond positively to you being passive aggressive, or submit to what you want to do over what they want to do. But if you want a good relationship, it takes that really like openness and sometimes really painful vulnerability. And then over time, it gets easier and you learn a lot about each other and you build that trust that you're both in it and are here to stay and that you can work through anything and have all the resources at your disposal.
Like that.
So thank you guys for listening. This will conclude, I think, our relationship series, unless we come up with any further ideas.
I
But
don't know about
there's so much to cover in this, and I think it also would be helpful to talk about other relationships,
Yeah.
especially maybe even parental relationships, as that's something that can be a bit of a challenge, and also can trace back the roots of some of the issues in our romantic relationships. So maybe we have a few more to come, but stay tuned next week and you'll find out.
Yeah.
So again, happy birthday to my best friend in the whole world. And I hope you guys have an awesome day. Thank you so much for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, share these episodes so we can continue creating more. And if there's ever any topics that you're interested in or would like to talk more about, always feel free to reach out to us via Instagram or our emails below. And we're always excited for this to be like a collaboration. So you're getting the info that you want and that you feel like you're part of an ongoing discussion. All right, we'll catch you guys next time on Time Under Tension.